Our journey begins in Buffalo. Heading east to Letchworth State Park, we'll fly down the Genesee River and admire some of the most impressive waterfalls in New York State. From there, we'll explore a few of the Finger Lakes before stopping briefly at Ithaca, home of Cornell University. Then it's northeast to Syracuse. Here we'll meet up with one end of the old Erie Canal, no longer in use, but preserved and protected as a state park. We'll journey along the old waterway, soaking in the history and industrial folklore before intercepting the new Erie Canal and continuing on to Otsego Lake and the city of Utica. We bring our journey to a close in Saratoga Springs, tourist haven and home to the oldest thoroughbred horse racing circuit in the country. With humble beginnings as a small trading post on the Buffalo Creek, this is New York State's second largest city and an important historical center. Rated by Forbes as one of the top 10 places to raise a family in America, Buffalo is a sporting hub, home to stunning feats of architecture and a vibrant melting pot of ethnic culture. After being burned to the ground by the British in the War of 1812, the city saw its fortunes reversed with the construction of the Erie Canal, as it was strategically positioned at the western end of the system. The construction of the canal brought immigrants in by the tens of thousands and led the settlement to incorporate as a city in 1832. Serving as an important manufacturing hub and center for railroad commerce, Buffalo was most populous and economically robust in the 1950s, with 580,000 people living here at its height. Since then, the population has been in decline, but a concerted effort to diversify the economy seems to be lifting the city back onto its feet. Education, life sciences, medicine, banking, and high technology are taking the place manufacturing once had. They're creating opportunities for growth and revitalizing the city. Buffalo is also renowned for its fine architecture. One exemplary building is the Darwin D. Martin Complex. Impressed by the young Frank Lloyd Wright's work, the entrepreneur and businessman Darwin Martin handed Wright the equivalent of a blank check to develop some land he had recently purchased. The project cost Martin $300,000, about $50 million today, but the result was worth it. The site is now a National Historic Landmark and considered by some architectural scholars to be one of Wright's finest achievements. Inspired as he was by natural beauty, it's no wonder that Wright created some of his best work in Buffalo. For only 100 kilometers southeast of the city is the magnificent Letchworth State Park, whose reputation as the Grand Canyon of the East is well deserved. The Genesee River roars through over 50 kilometers of lush forest and over 3 major waterfalls. These are the Upper Falls. The bridge behind them was originally built in 1852 using 1.5 square kilometers of timber from the surrounding forest. Now made of iron and steel, it's still used as a railroad crossing today and offers the best views of the waterfall below. Continue eastward and we arrive at the most voluminous of New York's glacial Finger Lakes, named for their long and thin shape. Seneca Lake, whose banks were once home to hundreds of Iroquois villages, is now surrounded by picturesque farmland, vineyards, and wineries. Further east, we arrive at the longest, Cayuga Lake. But perhaps what it is best known for is the Bohemian settlement at its southern end, the city of Ithaca. Named after the island home of the great classical hero Odysseus, Ithaca, with a modest population of 100,000, is a cultural powerhouse. Music, theatre and science enliven the city. But the town is most highly regarded for its higher education institutions, Cornell University being the foremost amongst them. Founded in 1869 by Senator Ezra Cornell, who donated his farm in Ithaca and gave an initial endowment of $500,000, the university is now one of the 8 prestigious Ivy League colleges, and often ranked in the top 10 institutions in the country. Cornell has been described as the nation's first truly American university because of its founder's egalitarian and practical vision for the school. He wanted to expand the limited American educational system and to open the doors of higher education to more Americans. With 41 Nobel laureates associated with the university, Cornell has always been on the front lines of innovation. It opened as a co-educational institution in 1870. Now, onwards we fly, from Ithaca, across the snow-dusted farmland, until nestled amongst the forests, we find the last of the Finger Lakes we'll be visiting on our journey. Skaneateles Lake. The lake is so pristine that nearby towns, including Syracuse, drink its water unfiltered. Ubiquitous in the landscape and history of New York State is the Erie Canal. And here is a once-used aqueduct just west of Syracuse in the town of Camillus, which runs over 9 Mile Creek but was abandoned in 1918. The Erie Canal was first proposed in 1808 as a means to link the waters of the lake of the same name to the Hudson River. Once completed, some called it the 8th wonder of the world. However, over the years, a number of enlargements of the original canal have left derelict remnants of the old canal scattered across the region. The Erie Canal brought growth and prosperity to many settlements in New York, not least of which was the city of Syracuse. Situated on the southeastern banks of Onondaga Lake, and named after the ancient Corinthian city on the coast of Sicily, Syracuse is the economic and educational center of central New York State. The settlement, which would eventually become Syracuse, grew up around the salt trade, with a commodity mined at the nearby salt springs that dot the periphery of the Onondaga Lake. The settlement then functioned as a major crossroads between the Erie Canal and its subsidiaries, later as a railroad hub, and now at a major intersection of highways. It is largely Syracuse University, for which the city is known. Abolitionists and female suffragists were long active in Syracuse, and this attitude contributed to the university's commitment to equality, with the first president of the school stating that there should be no invidious discrimination here against women. Brains and heart shall have a fair chance. Higher education suffered a shaky beginning in Syracuse, with Ezra Cornell rejecting the town as the site for Cornell University. His experience with being mugged here on numerous occasions compelled him to label the city a Sodom and Gomorrah. However, Syracuse University was soon granted land and start-up funds, and is now one of the most highly regarded colleges in the nation. Tracing the fortunes of Syracuse's success takes us through the old Erie Canal State Historic Park, which runs along approximately 60 kilometers of the original waterway. In operation for 100 years between 1817 and 1917, this section of the canal once took goods and passengers from Syracuse eastward to the New York town of Rome. The construction of the canal in its entirety was one of the most ambitious projects of 19th century America, and a triumph of engineering. But before continuing along the canal, a brief detour to the east will take us to the Turning Stone Casino and Resort. Established and run by the Oneida Indian Nation, it has been troubled with conflict and criticism since its inception. Although the New York state law forbids the operation of casinos, and the surrounding counties and towns oppose the facility, the Oneida Nation, as a sovereign entity separate from the state, was eventually granted the right to build and operate the resort as a gambling venue. Now, it's a massive tourist destination in central New York. After a few hands of blackjack and a martini, we meet back up with the old Erie Canal on our way to Rome, where it intersects with its newer counterpart, the much larger Barge Canal, constructed between 1905 and 1918. Once a bustling corridor of commerce, the canal fostered population surges and economic booms along its path. It is now used mostly by recreational craft. Erie Canal is an historic reconstruction of the 19th century settlement, where the first shovel load of dirt was overturned in the construction of the original canal in 1817. The village sits on the point where the old canal meets the new. An old lock which regulates the height of the water along the canal, and a number of typical buildings, including a church, tavern, blacksmith, school, ice house, and railroad station, have been constructed to give visitors an idea of what life in such a settlement may have been like. Horse-drawn vehicles and farm equipment from that early era can be seen in use on cobblestone or dirt roads that would have been typical at the time. As we move along the waterway, we eventually make our way to Rome, New York. And here stands Fort Stanwix. Rumoured to be the first place where the American flag was flown in battle, Fort Stanwix has had an action-packed history. Constructed by the British in 1758 during the French and Indian War, the fort was soon after abandoned and went into gradual disrepair. But with the American colony's declaration of independence 20 years later, the fort's strategic location was soon recognized and re-fortifications began. It subsequently withstood a major siege by the British forces in 1777. The fort burned to the ground in 1781, and by 1830, commercial development in Rome had completely covered the structure. However, in 1934, Franklin D. Roosevelt established the area as a national monument. Then, 40 years later, archaeologists uncovered the fort, and reconstructions began. Now it stands proudly once again. Following the Erie Canal down from Fort Stanwix, we find the mechanics of the waterway in action at Lock 20 State Canal Park. Today, 57 such locks are positioned along the length of the canal, regulating the water flow as barges and other craft make their way up and down the waterway. Using this simple concept of locks, boats travelling the length of the canal rise from tidewater level at Troy, New York, to 128 metres at Rome, then descend down to 110 metres as they continue westward, only to rise again to 172 metres by the time they reach Lake Erie. We come to a town whose history and fortunes have always been tied to waterways. Established as a post along the Mohawk River, where local merchants would trade with the native Iroquois, Utica was a commercially minded settlement from the outset. And being positioned along the first section of the Erie Canal to open in 1820, Utica saw its population and economy boom. The canal ran directly through the town, and it served as a perfect midway stopover for those travelling the waterways. The city also became a transportation hub, commercial centre, and major player in the textile and tool industries. After the construction of the Erie and other canals, and with Utica establishing itself as a centre of trade, more railroad lines were built to bring goods and travellers through the city. So in 1914, to meet the increased rail traffic and to impress visitors upon arrival, the Utica Union Station was constructed. It now services buses, commuter rail, and the Adirondack Scenic Railroad, which takes passengers through the snowy mountains. But we are heading in the opposite direction, south. As we fly over the forest and rolling farmlands, we gain almost 250 metres in elevation, coming eventually to Otsego Lake. "15 kilometres long and at a height of 450 metres, it has squeezed its way into the American myth by way of author James Fenimore Cooper, playing a central role in a number of his novels, including The Last of the Mohicans. Surrounded by small towns with plenty of forested areas and a state park on its bank, Otsego Lake is a convergence point for outdoor enthusiasts. And at the northeastern end, tucked away in Hyde Bay, stands the magnificent Hyde Hall. A neoclassical country mansion that combines the architectural traditions of the old and new world, it was one of the largest houses in America at the time of its construction, perhaps the largest. Funded by George Clark, the grandson of a prominent political figure in colonial New York, the mansion was built in sections between 1817 and 1833. The passage of time and the mansion's abandonment during World War II took a serious toll on the building. Demolition seemed like a very real possibility until a community group stepped in and spearheaded the movement to restore and preserve the structure. Now the building and grounds are recognized as cultural assets and National Historic Landmarks. Also in Glimmerglass State Park, along with Hyde Hall, is the oldest surviving covered bridge in the United States. Built in 1823, it crosses Shadow Brook at a length of 16 meters. It is built in the classic American Burr arch style, named after Theodore Burr, the New York engineer who patented the design. Flying away from Lake Otsego, we move 100 kilometers east to the city of Saratoga Springs. The word Saratoga is generally considered to be a corruption of the Mohawk Indian phrase meaning the hillside country of the Quiet River, referring to the Hudson River, which runs 25 kilometers to the south. The city has always been a tourist location, aided initially by the Saratoga Railroad in 1832. Today there are many reasons tourists come to Saratoga: the colonial history, the Saratoga Lake, the mineral springs. But one pastime overshadows the rest: horse racing. For over 100 years, tourism has been the main source of income for Saratoga, and a vast number of those tourists come specifically for the horse racing in summer. Established in 1863, the Saratoga Racecourse is the oldest organized sporting venue anywhere in the United States, with nicknames like the House of Upsets And graveyard of champions, many great racehorses like Secretariat suffered unexpected defeats here. There are three main tracks that make up the Saratoga course, their combined presence dominating the landscape of the city. Due to its long history, the track is rich with tradition and lures in thousands of tourists every summer. It's an American institution and a perfect place to end this journey.